Bloomberg TV and radio is this evening's political panel. Caitlin Legacki, former Commerce Department official for the Biden administration and Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Maura Gillespie, founder of Blue Stack Strategies. Welcome to you both. Maura, obviously you spent many years in the House, including working for a Speaker of the House. When we consider this tax package, the spending cuts package that involves cuts to Medicaid, the many different elements of the Republican conference who are making noise and expressing dissatisfaction with some of these components, how steep is this uphill climb for Speaker Johnson, who, as we speak, is meeting with members of the SALT caucus?
It's pretty significant, largely due to the fact that you only have 3 votes to lose here for the Speaker. So he's got to be really cognizant of that, and I know he and his team is. But in having these conversations tonight, with the SALT caucus in particular, the interesting factor is that, in states like California, New York, and New Jersey, the high interest, the income property taxes, they're all pretty high. And to balance that out, they're looking out for their constituents, right? Mike Lawler is trying to look out for his constituents in order to get reelected in a blue state. And so trying to balance that out with what the federal government can do as far as the budget goes is a delicate dance that I don't know that Speaker Johnson has a plan right now of how to get out of this. But not only do you have the SALT caucus, then you also have the Thomas Masseys, who are just a hard no matter what happens. So he really only has 2 then that he has to try and, that he can only lose.
Well, and Chip Roy's suggesting that he might be a hard vote to win over as well. When we consider, Caitlin, the SALT issue in particular, it's blue states we're talking about. This is actually something that a lot of Democratic members of Congress want to see happen, too. Is it more advantageous for Democrats if there isn't as big of an increase to the SALT cap because it might be detrimental to these Republicans who are currently holding seats Democrats have a chance of picking up in 2026? Or do they actually want this for their constituents?
I think Democrats are much more focused on issues like SNAP and Medicaid cuts than they are on the SALT issues, which will get resolved within the Republican caucus, regardless of where those communities exist. I think the SALT cap is an interesting one that cuts across a lot of party lines on both sides of the aisle. But I don't think that there are many Democrats that are going to be deciding votes based on the SALT cap increase, specifically because the cuts to SNAP, public education, Medicaid are so much more significant. And that's really what they're kind of balancing this budget on, and that's where they're doing the bulk of the cutting, that they're going to push back on that first and foremost.
Well, and when we consider those cuts to SNAP, to entitlement programs, Maura, are those the things that actually risk coming back to bite Republicans, that risk the House majority itself?
I certainly see them being used as, in political campaigns for especially those more contentious seats. But I do think the SALT tax issue, especially in places like New York, New Jersey, and California, that is something you're already seeing people who are looking to run against some of these members of Congress. They're already pointing to it, saying that they let this go. I would never let this happen. You're going to see that throughout the campaign as people are leading up to the midterms. And again, in a conference that is such a tight majority, you really don't have opportunities to lose too many people. So I do think that, yes, the SNAP programs and Medicaid cuts, they're going to have to figure out how to message that, and whether they're doing it to create a more structured system as opposed to having, excessive fraud, waste, and abuse. It's really going to come down to the messaging the Republicans do in their districts and in their, communities, and explaining why this had to happen, how it happens.
I also want to talk about and turn our focus to the Senate for a moment, because as President Trump is in the Middle East, of course, we've all spent a lot of time, at least here in Washington, talking about ahead of his trip in which he'll be visiting Qatar, the gift of an aircraft Qatar would like to bestow upon the administration to use as the new Air Force One. And earlier today, the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, had this message to deliver regarding that luxury jumbo jet that, according to the president, is being gifted specifically to the Defense Department. This is what Minority Leader Schumer said.
This is not just naked corruption. It is also a grave national security threat. The Attorney General must testify before both the House and Senate to explain why gifting Donald Trump a private jet does not violate the Emoluments Clause, which requires congressional approval, or any ethics law. So, until the Attorney General explains her blatantly inept decision, and we get complete and comprehensive to these and other questions, I will place a hold on all political nominees to the Department of Justice.
And I'm just wondering, Caitlin, of all the things to place a hold, or all the reasons why you would place a hold on nominees, it's this issue that Schumer picks?
I think this issue is a good opportunity to get the Attorney General up on Capitol Hill where they can ask her a whole breadth of questions. Obviously, this is an unprecedented situation. I think there's especially a lot of questions around the fact that the Attorney General used to lobby on behalf of the Kingdom of Qatar. And she's the one that personally signed off on this deal. So I think it's fair to ask those questions. I also think that there's a whole host of other issues that Senate Democrats are going to want to ask the Attorney General. But I do think that, we're also seeing significant skepticism about this deal from Senate Republicans. And so it's not a partisan issue. I wouldn't expect it to be a partisan issue. There are real questions to be asked about the security of this, about whether we can make sure that the president is flying on a safe aircraft. And so I think it's healthy to have that conversation.
Well, and it's not just Republicans in the Senate. Even Laura Gillespie, who is someone who has proudly said she would take a bullet for President Trump, also doesn't like the idea of this gift. Does this mean ultimately it's one that Donald Trump politically just isn't going to be able to accept?
I don't love the idea of putting Laura Loomer as the deciding factor of who's going to get upset about things or not. But I will say, as when I heard the news, and I'm sure as my fellow, Hill staffers or Hill alumni thought what it's going to be like to sit through that ethics gift rule, class and requirements you have to go through where you're not allowed to accept anything, even things that are under $50 you can't accept. So it's just really jarring, even having this conversation about a gift from a foreign entity of this magnitude. So I do think that, again, it's about messaging, right? How you explain this to people. And I do think that, just as my former boss used to say, it doesn't pass the smell test. And there are a lot of questions that need to be answered in regards to this, because, again, it wasn't necessarily given to the country. It seems as though it was being given to President Trump for his personal use in his personal presidential library when he's no longer president. So a lot of questions there. And yeah, something that could and should lose the most strongholds of MAGA supporters.
Well, of course, the president will be in Qatar tomorrow after spending his day today in Saudi Arabia and touting, Caitlin, the Saudi government pledging upward $600 billion plus, maybe getting to $1 trillion of foreign direct investment into the United States. Is that something President Trump can credibly say, promises made, promises kept? Look at all the money I'm bringing in, having it invested at home.
I think some of it is new investment. Some of it is old investment. You'll actually find that there's a lot of support on both sides of the aisle for foreign direct investment. So I think the devil is always in the details, especially with this president and how he announces deals. But we'll see. I think the bigger question, though, is whether those investments, those manufacturing projects can offset the cost of the rest of the tariff war that he's waging, the rest of the increases that most Americans are going to see on health care, on food, on baby supplies going forward that really are going to affect their bottom line on a daily basis.
Maura, we just have a minute left here, but President Trump, for the second term in a row, choosing to go to the Middle East first, is that a wise decision?
It's a decision that shouldn't surprise us. He likes the fanfare of having such an extravagant rollout. I think I saw photos of a McDonald's on wheels showing up for him.
Yes.
So I think he just really enjoys that part of it. But it is, to Caitlin's point, that foreign investment is important, and he needed a few wins to put on the board here so that people know that he is having things brought to America, that investments in America, and to get our economy going, and which was such a large part of the 2024 election that got him, back into the White House. So he certainly needed a few wins here to deliver for the American people.